Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coffee with Convery, where we caffeinate your curiosity with bold stories, actionable insights, and fresh takes on how we define and design your own success. Today's guest, Steve Jaffe, is a seasoned advertising and marketing executive, an author, and a resilience advocate. Steve's book, The Layoff Journey from Dismissal to Discovery, is reshaping how we think about job loss, recovery, and especially renewal. Steve's professional career spans decades in advertising, media, and marketing leadership. But behind the polished campaigns and successful boardroom pitches, Steve, like many of us, faced unexpected career turns, including layoffs. Rather than just letting those setbacks define him, he reframed them into discovery. His book draws directly from those lived experiences, offering a deep, personal, yet practical roadmap for navigating job loss. The layoff journey walks readers through the seven stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, reconstruction, and renewal, reminding us that career setbacks are not just about losing a paycheck, but about losing identity, routine, and stability. Those relatable stories, actionable strategies, and real world exercises that Steve has shows us how each stage can be transformed into a stepping stone towards your continued growth. If you've ever wondered how to move from dismissal to discovery, from grief to growth, and from uncertainty to renewal, this episode is for you. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction.
Absolutely. So, as we are getting started, I said, it's not a question of if this will happen, it's just a matter of when
Yeah,
layoff experience will happen. So, I'm really excited to get right into your thoughts and your insights when it comes to this because I don't think enough people are talking about it. And your book
yeah,
is something that really helps us think differently. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you a few rapid fire questions.
you
What
got it.
is your superpower?
My growth mindset,
Love it. Growth mindset. Favorite subject in school?
cultural geography.
Cultural geography. You're definitely my first cultural geography. I get a lot of math, a lot of math.
Oh,
I don't know
wow.
why. I was terrible at math, so I don't say
Yeah, me
that.
too. No, definitely not math.
So this is cool. I love this. We
Yeah.
all started somewhere. What was your very first
First job, I was a tanning salon attendant.
job? No. There you go. There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah.
Yeah. Hey, the tanning salons are, I don't, are they still big? They were big back
I
in the
don't think
day.
so. I don't think so. I
Yeah.
think people realize that like too much skin cancer came from them.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think people do the spray on tan now.
Now that's so true. Well, and I don't think they need an assistant for that. So I guess you'd be out of work.
Yeah,
But
right.
all right. Well, if you had to describe yourself in one word, what would it be?
Resilient.
Resilient. Love it. Okay, let's jump right into it. So, your book is powerful because it doesn't just shy away from the emotional toll of a job loss. You frame it as a process that mirrors grief. I 100% agree with that. What inspired you to write about layoffs through the lens of the seven stages of grief?
Yeah, yeah. So let me set the stage for your
Yeah,
audience
go right
here,
ahead.
and I'm going to give you the story arc, and it sets up the answer to that question well, I think.
Absolutely.
So, my first layoff came in the spring of 2001. I was living in San Francisco. I was working at a great ad agency on a great account. I had just gotten married, and it was literally and figuratively the springtime of my life. Everything was going great. And very unexpectedly, I got laid off. My first layoff came. The client went through some budgeting difficulties, and this became kind of the very first dot-com bubble that burst in San Francisco in 2001. So that experience left me completely unprepared, and it took me a very long time to come to terms with it and come out the other side. Now, fast forward, summer 2023, 22 years have passed. I'm on my fourth layoff, and it's really not a big deal at all. I sail right through it. It's water off a duck's back. And what I realize is that I've learned a set of skills. I've learned a set of coping skills that have allowed me to process this in maybe months rather than years. And it was in that realization that I found I wanted to share that knowledge that I gained with people that I was laid off with. there's about 20% of the company that also were caught up in that reduction in force. And some of them very, very young and new in their career. Some had going through their second layoff in a year. And so I really wanted to talk to them and give them like some advice and a practical guide to getting through this. And I realized, well, that's the subject of a book. I could help these people that I was laid off with, but I could also
Totally.
help so many more people. So I decided to use my experience, and I took the 7 stages of grief from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She was a behavioral research scientist that was looking at terminally ill patients and found that they went through these stages as they were passing. And uh, friends and family of those people were also experiencing these 7 stages as well. And then in time, this framework became really widely recognized as something that people go through in any kind of like traumatic life event. Certainly, a layoff would be considered a traumatic life event. And I found that the more I looked at them, the more I really recognized that this was stages that I went through personally in each of my layoffs. So I use these as the baseline for letting people kind of know what to expect, and
Yeah.
then in each of them, how to cope, how to manage, and come out the other side feeling as if this isn't a like declarative statement on them as a person or any kind of like negative connotations. Rather, it's maybe an opportunity for growth and an opportunity to find deeper meaning and opportunity on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, like the people that, like I said, it's not if, it's a when. Everyone will go
Right.
through this, but we're not prepared. No one prepares you for this. And I think so much of, including myself in this, when I had gone through it, like you're right, so much of my identity was linked to the work I did or the job
Mm.
or the company I worked for.
Yeah.
And when you try to, and when you get separated from that, you're like a fish out of water, right? It's
Right.
just so tough to
Right.
deal with.
Right.
Yeah. No,
You come to identify who you are as a person by what you do. So where you work, the things that you do at work, um, in a good way, bring you joy and fulfillment and purpose and obviously a paycheck. But sometimes that can become the only way that you define yourself. So if that job is removed, then who are you? What are you left with? And that can be a really empty um, kind of reckoning with yourself if
yeah,
you don't have more of a balance between what you're doing at work with what you're doing outside of work, or how you're finding meaning and purpose and passion and joy. Um, so one of the things that I talk through in the book is um, making sure that your joy and your passion and your purpose are aligned with what you're doing, so that if and when the job is taken away, you still have all of these other things.
hmm,
And certainly, if you have, a 25-year career in marketing, but you lose your job, well, you still have all of that knowledge and expertise
that's right,
in marketing. You just don't have the title any longer, right?
right.
So, um, people get wrapped up in what it says on the business card, but that's not really who you are.
No, no, not at all. Thank you for that. It's really interesting, and this topic is so timely, I think. So you've led major accounts, managed teams, helped brands find their voice in competitive markets. When your own career hit a turning point, what helped you shift from dismissal to discovery?
Yeah, yeah. So that first layoff that I went through in the spring of 2001, I had no skills whatsoever. And what I learned over time were really healthy coping skills. I learned to have a growth mindset, um, but I learned to see the experience of being laid off as a detour rather than a roadblock. And I really came to understand that layoff isn't a statement about my personal value, my skills, knowledge, or expertise. Um, the thing with layoffs is these are no fault terminations. They don't have anything to do with performance. So, and even though that's the case, people can very easily take some sort of negative connotation
Hmm.
about them as a person or them as a professional, and that's a very slippery slope. You need to just recognize that layoffs are a budget exercise that companies do when they're faced with difficult times. So whether it's dot-com bubble bursting, whether it's a global recession or a pandemic or other things that are testing a company's budget, it's much easier to have a reduction in force, save that money that you have on headcount, put it to the bottom line than it is to go out and try and increase sales. So, in many times with a layoff, you're kind of at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yep.
And in a way, that's about all that you should give that. Like you shouldn't give it that much more oxygen and read into it um, because it really isn't. Now if you get fired, that's a totally different situation. But
Right.
layoffs aren't that. So that kind of shift in mindset and not giving it more oxygen than it deserves and not putting my own
Great
self-esteem and
insight.
self-worth into it is a big shift in perspective and how you view the experience.
That's great insight about the oxygen. I 100%. Have a second part question because you're making me think about a few
Mhm,
things here.
mhm,
So I've recently had friends or colleagues, and being in recruitment for years, I know a lot of talent through that, right? But even friends of mine, like, and I wonder if there's some advice for these organizations to consider when they go through layoffs, because I don't know, and I don't love when people blame COVID for everything. It was 5 years ago, first of all, but people say, "Oh, well, we're in a different place," but we shouldn't lose our humanity when it comes to it. So when these organizations are considering layoffs, I think they need to, and not all, maybe some do it in a good way. I don't know if that is a good way. And maybe that's something we can talk about here. But I've had a friend who was like, had a job, senior level marketing, big time, like, again, wasn't performance, but included in the entire organization that had, I don't remember what percentage, maybe it was 20% layoffs. Everyone had called to a meeting, president says stuff is
mhm.
bad. And the next thing, everyone got
Yeah, right.
an email layoff. Like,
Yeah,
are you kidding me?
yeah.
Your boss can't talk to you about it? Like, that's ridiculous. Or the HR
Mhm,
person, like, you're laid
mhm.
off. You have any questions, contact HR, but there's really not much to talk about. Send in your computer, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Like, that's one, but I've heard many variations of this that it made my stomach like
Yeah,
turn.
yeah.
Because again, these people are like giving up time to spend on the soccer field with their kids or whatever they're doing and working hard, and to be let off like with the email. I don't know
Yeah.
what are organizations missing in that
Yeah.
conversation, because it feels terrible and it is terrible.
Right. Yeah. The horror stories around layoffs, it's awful. I've heard of people, they've been on business trips and their corporate card has been shut off. People can get locked out of the office where their key card doesn't work. I've heard of women getting laid off while they're in labor, while somebody is on FMLA, while they're on vacation over the holidays. I mean, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said humanity. Um, you treating employees better, right? Having some transparency um, around what's going to happen, why it's happening, um, and I think certainly having one-on-one conversations with everybody that's affected,
Yeah,
whether it's in person or over Zoom, but
yeah,
doing it with some care. And I think understanding people's personal circumstances. Um, there are times when somebody may need healthcare coverage as a bridge because of some particular health
For
situation that
sure.
they're in. Immigrants that are here under visa requirements. If you get let go, you only have, I think, like 30 days to find another job. Otherwise, you have to leave the country. And in this market, when it's taking like 6 months, 9 months,
Or
that can be really
longer.
difficult. Right, right. So there are circumstances where it's not necessarily like a cookie cutter. Okay, here's 2 weeks severance. Here's your Cobra package. Thanks. Turn in your computer. Like that can exacerbate the situation and the circumstances in a way that um, really make it difficult to bounce back from.
Yeah.
So um, yeah, not doing any of those kind of underhanded things like locking people out of the office or just
Yeah,
turning
that's
off
true.
their computers.
Hmm.
Yeah, it can get bad.
Yeah, I think we both agree the humanities side. Just take humanity, figure out what you could do better to make that happen,
Right,
right? Because it's
right.
happening and it will continue
Yeah.
to happen.
Yeah, and
Um,
you know, if you go into it as if, listen, layoffs are ubiquitous. Everybody at some point is going to go through a layoff. So when you're in the process of crafting your layoff strategy, just simply think through how would I want to get laid off? Does this match with what would make me feel like I was a valued employee that you appreciated, not somebody that you're like throwing away like a piece of trash?
Absolutely, absolutely. And also, sort of in high pressure industries or any industries, I think, one of the things I hear and think about too is like to pause, reflect, and process the emotions of the layoff rather than just rushing to move on. Now, back to your situation with healthcare, if you like, you need a job, or maybe you were laid off without any type of money or anything to carry you over for anything, maybe you have to rush to move on because you just don't have a choice. But if you could really go through the proper way of reflecting and processing a layoff, what's your thought about not rushing to move on?
Yeah, the best thing you can do to set yourself up for success is to not, like, the day after you get laid off, start updating your resume and start talking to people and trying to line up interviews. Don't do that. You should take some time, take a breath, sit with the experience, give yourself an opportunity to um, accept that what you've been through is difficult, it's
Mhm.
traumatic. What you're feeling is okay and it's normal. And to work through some of these things, like the first stage is denial. What comes with denial is shock. And
Yeah,
um, you can be in shock for a couple of days. That kind of fog, that's not a place where you're going to find clarity on
yeah,
your next job. You need to just sit and process for a minute. Um, Preferably, you give yourself some time to work through these stages because in this process, um, the first four stages are kind of where really the heavy emotional lifting is done. You have um, like the denial, anger, bargaining, depression.
oh yeah,
That's a
yeah,
tough place to be, right? But then you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. You start to come out the other side when you have acceptance, reconstruction, and renewal. And it's there that you find alignment with your purpose and your passion and your values, and you kind of recommit either to the path that you're on, or you may decide to do some kind of a pivot. Now,
mm,
if in that exercise you say, listen, I really love what I'm doing and I want to continue down that road, when you have managed these stages of grief and you've come to that realization or conclusion and you go on that job interview, you're going to communicate with that interviewer why you want that job, and it's going to be really sincere and genuine, right? And if they ask you, well, tell me about what happened with that last job or your last employer, you're going to have processed all of that in a way where you're not going to stumble and stammer and it's going to be a big elephant in the
yeah.
room. You're going to be able to move right through it and right past it.
That's great
So,
advice. Yeah,
yeah, it's really important to take some time and to process it. And you're right, um, there is a balance in, wow, I just lost my income and probably my health insurance, and I need to get back at this. But don't mistake like action for progress. A lot of times
Mm,
people feel like you got to, I'm doing something every day. I'm filling out like 10 resumes and I'm trying to get interviews. But if you haven't processed these stages of grief, you may be doing more harm than good.
yeah, great, great insights. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Um, how can self-reflection and reframing help professionals rediscover their why and set maybe a new direction?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Um, I think it's in that learning and growth mindset, um, seeing this as an opportunity. So I always tell people, listen, I'm not somebody that is going to say that there's a silver lining in a layoff because layoffs absolutely suck.
Yeah, they do.
But you can find um, you can find it as an opportunity to kind of find yourself or do some introspection and some self discovery. Um, it gives you a pause that you may not normally have when you're working really hard you're putting in whatever 40, 60 hours a week. You're not doing a lot of introspection, but this can give you a pause to kind of get back in touch with yourself and find some alignment and some purpose and some meaning.
Yeah, 100%. And I also want to ask you because I think when people go through this, I've heard people tell me they're like, I went through all the stages of like people are using these words too, the stages of grief when it comes to losing a
Mhm.
job. But I a few people have said to me, and I kind of felt this about some one of those too, where it was like at the end they were like, "Thanks for the gift," right?
Mm,
Because
mhm,
it got them somewhere else
yeah,
at a
yeah,
time when they would have thought about going there, and
right,
now they're refueled and refreshed because as they look back, they're like, maybe it was time. Like maybe I wasn't really even
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Like you
yeah,
get, and then when you're going through in the beginning, you don't even think that. You're not about
yeah,
gift. You're more about anger and stuff. But
right.
do you hear
Here's
that
one of
too?
the things. Yeah, I mean, and here's one of the things. Like, aside from all of that, um, you could be in a field that's experiencing contraction. AI may be impacting your field, and the career path that you're on may be one that could be diminishing over time. So your layoff is indicative of the way that field is going, right? I found that when I was in marketing, and I started to find like I got laid off, and I noticed that there was layoffs in general in marketing. That was pivoting toward more of like marketing specialists,
Hmm.
and I was seeing all of these job listings for product marketing managers. And I thought, well, if I could translate my experience to be relevant to product marketing, I could take advantage of this new, like, burgeoning career path.
Yeah,
And I was able to do that. Um, I wouldn't have made that pivot or that transition unless I was kind of forced to. But that 30,000 foot view of what's happening in marketing right now is my layoff more indicative of the industry. And if I stay in this path, would I just be likely to, be on the other side of layoffs again?
yeah.
Um,
Same.
that's a valuable perspective, right? And what I found
All right.
was I really liked product marketing. It took advantage of a lot of the skills that I had developed. And I was really happy with that transition. So, yeah, I will also say that, after many layoffs, I have gone on to, you know, um, negotiate a higher salary,
Yeah,
end up in a good place. And when you're in the middle of it, you don't necessarily see it. It can be a dark time, but if you are able to open yourself up to the experience, there are some good things that can come from it.
absolutely. Absolutely. So you've written about how anger can fuel action and how renewal can come from rebuilding with intention, which I love that. Can you share a story, maybe even your own network in advertising or business, where someone turned a layoff into an opportunity for reinvention?
Yeah, yeah. I have a number of stories in the book. There's one in particular that I like because I really like resilience. I
Yeah.
like people who, you get knocked down 8 times and you stand up nine. And I found one of these stories just particularly inspiring. Um, so people may or may not be familiar with a fashion designer named Vera Wang. She kind of got her big start by designing wedding dresses,
Yep.
and then from wedding dresses went on to be a really famous fashion designer. But what people don't know necessarily is that she began her career as a competitive ice skater. And
I did not know
she,
that.
yeah, so she was trying to make the Olympics, and she didn't make the Olympic team. Um, that setback um, caused her to pivot into something else. And she joined Vogue magazine as an editor at 23 years old. And after 17 years at Vogue, um, I think she got laid off, and she moved over to Ralph Lauren. She became a designer at Ralph Lauren. And then at 40, she started this wedding dress business.
See?
And that at 40 kind of became what really defined her, but people don't necessarily know of some of those earlier career setbacks.
No
Um,
idea.
there's another story I really, really like a lot. That's also in the book. The woman that founded Spanx, when she was a child, her father had this practice of asking her, "So, what did you fail at this week?" And it became a like a positive way of reframing a failure as a success. And so she was not afraid to try new things and to experiment. And ultimately, that mindset is what allowed her to build the business of Spanx and go on to be a really successful entrepreneur.
Wow.
Um, and that shift in mindset is something that if we all looked at failure as opportunity to learn from.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that a layoff is a failure, but I do think that when life hands you setbacks, to turn the tables on it and say,
Yep.
what can I learn from this? And not be afraid of that challenge can be really empowering.
Absolutely. What advice do you have for people who feel stuck in the depression or bargaining stage? Like, what do you do when you're going through that? Like, what could you do?
Yeah. I spoke earlier about healthy coping skills.
Hmm.
And I write in the book that I particularly experienced depression in a difficult way. That was one of the probably the more challenging stages of grief for me. And I found that there were things that I could do to help me keep depression at bay. So they sound simple, but when you ladder them all up, it becomes a really great foundational support system. So, eat a really healthy diet, get plenty of sleep, get some exercise.
Yep.
There are really healthy chemicals that your brain releases in exercise that are a natural uh, fighter of depression: serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin. If you're getting some regular exercise, it really helps battle depression. Um, I found that trying to focus on a healthy mindset,
Hmm.
um, a good example of that would be like a gratitude practice, getting your mind thinking about what you're grateful for, what you're thankful for, what's going well
Hmm.
and positive in your life. Particularly around a layoff, it's really easy to look at all of the negative, destructive things that are going on. Um, Getting your mind trained to think about what's happening that's positive is another really good kind of shift in mindset. And if you can, do a little mindful meditation or praying, however you define that. Even if it's just an opportunity to sit quietly and take some deep breaths, um, it will help you find clarity. And so a lot of those are kind of like non-negotiables for me that I try and do every day.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I would also add to that, limiting alcohol intake.
Hmm.
Alcohol in itself is a depressant, and that can only exacerbate depression as well. So
Hmm.
those are all things that I kind of throw in the bucket of healthy coping skills
Yep.
that give yourself an opportunity, right? Um, and in terms of bargaining, your question was bargaining, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Bargaining is interesting because you know, it's both a literal thing that you're going to have to do when you're laid off, which is negotiate, essentially bargain your severance agreement. And I give a lot of tips around that. And then there's the bargaining that you do within yourself of, gosh, what could have I have done differently? What would have happened if I had done this? If I had a different conversation with someone? And um, you're never going to win that. You're never going to find the answers to that question, right? And it's like this tug of war that's happening inside of you. And what I suggest people to do is to just drop that rope
Yep.
and not engage in that tug of war. And instead of thinking about what could have happened, what could have I have done differently, reframe that question to look forward and say, what's next? What do I want to be doing in response to this? And don't look backward, but look forward.
Yep.
Um, and um, understanding that there are some questions around a layoff that you're just never going to get can be really freeing and really empowering,
Yep.
and can allow you to just, like I said, drop the tug of war and move forward.
Great thoughts and advice. Thank you. We talked earlier about the way some companies and organizations have and are doing as far as managing the way they lay people off or how it gets communicated. But I wanted to go beyond just that and talk about what about supporting your employees in this transition? What else could they maybe do differently in the
Yeah, yeah.
organization?
There are some that do like transition.
Yep.
I've only heard of this. I've never actually worked at a place that does like a successful transition plan where they provide coaching and they provide like outplacement services and they kind of help you find another job. Um, I wish was the beneficiary of that, but so I've only heard that
Yeah.
companies do that. I think if more companies did, um, it certainly would be a great thing.
Yeah.
There's so many needs when someone gets laid off, especially now, like it's taking 9, maybe 12 months until you find another job.
Oh yeah.
Um, some employees that, like I mentioned, their field might be going away
Right.
because of AI. Um, one of the things I think the government could do much better is the government had all of these layoffs, right? Never before in history did the government lay off large numbers of employees like this. So you only have government experience. Where are you supposed to go if you've only worked in the government, right? How are you going to find another job? Um, they should be doing some sort of outplacement for these
Absolutely.
folks to
Yep.
reskill, upskill, to then help them make a transition. Because that's a difficult place to be.
That's a really good point because even being in recruiting and talent management, like we use the words of transferable skills all the time. We throw it around everywhere. And I remember even talking to students like, well, what is a transferable skill?
Hmm, hmm.
Right. But even in this situation, just having that communication understanding of like, well, you actually have done something here for 20 years that you can now articulate as a transferable skill over here.
Right,
If you
right,
just leave people on their own, doesn't come natural to say, oh, is this a transferable skill or not? Right.
right,
And
right.
so you're right about that. There could be definitely programs better to do that and help
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And I wish people in HR understood transferable skills much better,
yeah,
especially now. They're looking for somebody that's done the exact job
uh-huh,
before. And they're not using any creative thinking to say, okay, what are the skills this person has that have allowed them to be successful that would help them be successful here? And I mean, part of that is because they rely on an ATS and there's all this AI
Oh,
and job hunts right now. But the thing that they're getting is the same thinking. If you hire somebody that's done the job before in the exact same way, you're not bringing on any new out of the box thinking. You're just getting the same old thing that may or may not work, right?
yep,
So, along with that comes a level of mediocrity that I think we're just kind of like doubling down on.
yeah.
Um, yeah, if you want innovation, you can't hire somebody that's just done the same thing forever.
No, because they'll eventually they're either going to get bored or they're going to be mediocre. Mediocrity is going to come right through because that's all they care to do.
Right, right,
Um, not innovate in the role or anything like that.
right.
Yeah, no, very good points. Um, where can our listeners here, find you, find the book? Yeah, I just want to make sure we do a good plug for that too.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, thanks. So, if you like what you've heard, you can go to my website, thestevejaffe.com. There's a free chapter. You can download the free chapter if you want to take it for a test drive. If you like what you read, you can go to Amazon, just type in the Layoff Journey, and you can get the book on Amazon. Uh, we can connect on LinkedIn. I'm
Thank
on
you.
Instagram, and I also have a blog on Substack. So you can find all sorts of information. You can learn more. You can go straight to the book. And I'm happy to connect with anybody. If anybody's going through a layoff and is having a difficult time, I'd love to make myself available and help them any way I can above and beyond the book.
Great, thank you. So before we wrap, which I have about another 20 questions I could ask you right now, but before we wrap, if you think about everyone goes through this journey, it does happen. What do you think about you know, if we could maybe think differently about the workplace culture? I know it's kind of out there a little bit, but if students preparing for their first job, mid-year career professionals in transition or leaders shaping workplace culture, what would it be to make a change? It obviously is going to happen, but what could they do in their day to day to? It's going to sound really weird because I had this conversation before about celebrating people when they leave, but they're
Hmm.
alumni of your organization,
Right.
right? They're going to go on,
Yeah.
and the best thing when I left IBM was not because of a layoff, but because I got another opportunity. They're like, we want you to be like a proud alumni of what
Yeah.
happened here, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
conversation happened with me when I was leaving,
Right.
which is
Right.
great. I'm like, of
Right.
course I am.
Yeah.
But
You
yeah,
know what I would? Yeah, totally. I would tell companies, um, if your son or daughter were hired at this company, how would you want them treated from the interview process to while they're working here to what their benefits and salary are,
yep,
all the way through however they exit, whether they get laid off or they just transition on their own. If it was your son or daughter, how would you want that experience? Um, and are you living up to that now? What would you currently change so that you would want them treated the way you would want them treated, right?
yep,
I think if everybody used that as a lens to look at their culture, right? And I think um, oftentimes culture can be defined by, well, we had a pizza party on a Friday, or people can dress casual, or we have cocktail happy hours on Friday, right? That's
yep,
not necessarily culture. And what I would encourage people who are young in their careers, who might be going on some of their early rounds of interviews, um, the question around "tell me about your culture" is well-meaning, but you probably need to go deeper than that. So what you really want to ask is, um, um, tell me about maybe your healthcare benefits. Tell me about your communication style. Tell me how you interact during one-on-ones. Tell me about your expectations. Ultimately, that's what's indicative of a culture,
Hmm.
how leaders interact with each other and how they interact with people that work for and with them. Um, that's really what's going to shape your experience. So go a little bit deeper than
Yeah,
tell
100%.
me about your culture, and don't mistake happy hours and summer Fridays for culture.
Right, right. I agree. I agree. Well, again, I could go really long. I have so many other things that maybe we'll catch up offline as well. I have so many things I want
Yeah.
to chat with you about.
All right.
But this brings us to the end of this episode. I want to thank you for showing us that job loss isn't just an ending. It can be a catalyst for resilience, reflection, and reinvention. Your career in advertising and marketing gives weight to your message, and your personal journey reminds us that setbacks can refine us into something even stronger. So, thank you so much for being a big part of this podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you here, and I learned a few things today too. So, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Awesome. So, to our listeners, if today's episode inspired you, share it with someone navigating their own transition. Subscribe to the podcast, coffeewithconvery.com. You can also follow Coffee with Convery on Instagram for more stories, behind the scenes stories, as well as upcoming episodes. This is Coffee with Convery, where we remind you that success doesn't always come from climbing that corporate ladder. Sometimes